All right, let's talk about psychological momentum. You know that invisible force in sports that can make an underdog feel like a champion or cause a surefire winner to completely fall apart. So picture this. You're out on the court. You've just sunk 3 shots in a row. You get the ball again, and you just know this next one is going in. It feels like you can't miss, right? Athletes call that having the hot hand or being in the zone. But here's the billion-dollar question that has puzzled athletes and scientists for decades. Is it actually real, or is it all just in our heads? So let's start there. Before we even get into the nitty-gritty science, what is that feeling? What are athletes actually talking about when they say they've got momentum on their side? Okay, so check this out. The most important word here, perceived. See, the folks who first studied this, they didn't define it as some law of physics. Nope. They said it's a state of mind. It's all about the feeling that you're on a roll, just unstoppably moving toward that win. And this just nails it, right? Researchers went out and actually talked to athletes, and this is the kind of thing they heard over and over. It's more than just being confident. It's this deep feeling of, well, invincibility. Like your mind and body are perfectly connected, and there's just no way you can lose. All right, so everyone feels it. Case closed, right? Well, not so fast, because as powerful as that feeling is, science came along and just threw a massive wrench in the whole idea. The big question became, does feeling like you're on a streak actually mean you're more likely to score the next point? And the first major challenge really came from this one landmark study back in 1985. You had these 3 researchers, Gilovich, Tversky, and Valone, and they decided, you know what, let's actually test this whole hot hand thing in basketball. So they got to work analyzing thousands and thousands of shots from pro players. But before they dropped their bombshell results, they did something clever. They surveyed a bunch of basketball fans. And get this, a whopping 91% of them were totally convinced that a player who just made a shot, or 2, was way more likely to make the next one. I mean, it makes sense, right? Success should breed more success. Yeah, about that. Here's the kicker. The actual data, it showed the exact opposite. A player's chance of making their next shot had nothing to do with whether they made the last one. Those epic hot streaks everyone saw, statistically, they were no different from the patterns you'd get just by flipping a coin. And this gave us the hot hand fallacy, this idea that our brains are just wired to see patterns, even in total randomness. So, this is the core of the whole debate. On one side, you have literally every athlete's personal experience. That feeling of being in the zone is so real. But on the other side, you've got these cold, hard stats saying, nope, it's just a cognitive bias. And this clash is what really kicked off decades of new research. But hold on, what if the answer isn't so black and white? What if both sides are kind of right? What if momentum isn't about some magical ability to predict the future, but it's about what's happening in your mind right now, in the present? And that brings us to the psychology of it all. Yeah, so it turns out momentum is really fueled by a few key things going on in your head. First, there's something called self-efficacy. That's your basic belief that, hey, I can do this. Then you've got sport confidence, which is more specific, like, I'm good at this sport. And finally, there's perceived control, that awesome feeling that you're the one in charge. When all 3 of those are cranked up to 11, that's when momentum feels absolutely real. So how does this actually happen? Well, it's not magic. It's more like a chain reaction. It all kicks off with some big moment in the game, a pivotal event. Think of a huge 3-pointer or an amazing save. That single play changes how you perceive the game. Suddenly, you get this huge psychological surge, more confidence, more energy, and that surge actually changes your behavior. You get sharper, you make faster decisions, and that change in your behavior is what can lead to better performance. So you can see we're moving way beyond just asking, is it real or is it fake? The way we think about momentum now is, well, it's a lot more interesting. It's not an on-off switch, it's much more like a wave. Yeah, a lot of modern researchers talk about it as a complex dynamic system. Sounds fancy, but all it really means is that momentum is this constantly changing thing. It's affected by everything, your own mindset, sure, but also what your opponent is doing, the energy from the crowd, even stuff that happened in past games. It's always ebbing and flowing. And this, right here, is so important. Forget for a second whether the original hot hand streak is statistically real. The simple feeling that you have momentum, that has very real, very measurable effects on you. Your thinking gets sharper,
That's cognition. Your mood and confidence go up. That's affect. And you start making better decisions. That's behavior. The feeling itself changes you.
But here's the thing. It's a total double-edged sword. When momentum is positive, you get that amazing flow state where everything just clicks. But negative momentum is just as real and just as powerful. That's what's happening when an athlete chokes. Suddenly, their focus gets all tight, they start overthinking everything, and one tiny mistake can send them spiraling into doubt. Okay, so if momentum is this powerful psychological wave, can you learn to surf it? And maybe even more important, can you stop a negative wave from totally wiping you out? Well, the great news is the answer seems to be yes. So, what's the game plan here? First, always remember, it's a psychological state. It all starts with how you perceive things. Your confidence is the fuel, so you have to protect it. A huge tool for this is having pre-performance routines. You know, like a basketball player bouncing the ball exactly 3 times before a free throw. It seems small, but those little rituals are like an anchor. They bring your focus back to the process, not the last shot you missed or made. And that is key to managing the swings. When you think about it, this whole new way of looking at momentum is actually pretty empowering. It stops being this random, mysterious force that just happens to you, and it becomes a psychological state that you can actually influence, something you can build. So the real question isn't just about catching the next wave of momentum, it's about whether you're ready to start creating your own.